Hello, everyone. Welcome to the MuseScore Cafe for today. I believe this is the 27th of January. I should know this. And uh, this is my weekly series of chats where I talk about some aspect of making music with MuseScore. And the I don't have a, a really specific topic today, and I'm really hoping to be able to get input from you people. And I will tell you right now. Well, first of all, let me just check out the chat here, and I see that there's people introducing themselves, and great. I love to see that. Love to see where everyone's coming from. And okay, so the thing that I chose to talk about is the idea of problem solving, which I talked about from my experience as a developer last week, but now I want to talk about, my experience as a user of MuseScore and talk about specific uh, problems that you might need to solve in creating your scores. And sometimes it's just you don't know how to use some feature, and that's great. I'm happy to answer those questions. Sometimes it's, well, MuseScore doesn't support this directly, and here's some clever workaround to get the thing happening. So I want to show you some, like, so first of all, as far as the things that I just, one just you just don't know how to do. I don't have that problem much anymore because at this point in my experience, I think I know pretty much everything MuseScore can do. Um, but I have a lot of cases where I know I want to do something that MuseScore can't do, and or at least can't do directly, and I have to come up with some creative workaround for. And so I'll show some of those. I'll go back in time and show you some of my older things where I did something maybe in a way that wasn't as good, and maybe because I didn't know how to do it then, or maybe a feature didn't exist then that does exist now. So I'm going to do these, but here's the thing: I would love to be able to help you guys with your problems as well. So the reason we're looking here at the MuseScore Cafe page here is this is the group on, oh no, darkness. What? Oh, you're that kind of darkness. I thought you meant my screen went dark. My screen's still visible, right? Screen's still visible? I hope my screen's still visible. Looks like it is to me. Um, but you're talking about darkness as in what's going on in Australia right now. Okay. Um, so anyhow, this is the MuseScore Cafe group on uh, MuseScore.com, which I created some time ago, and we used it some. Those of you who were around, like last summer when we did the Corona Canon, we used this group to post some stuff, and then I created a new group just for that, I think. But anyhow, this group is a place where you can attach scores, and then we can discuss them in the cafe if that is you know something that comes up, because the thing is you can't post links into the YouTube chat. Somehow YouTube chat uh system blocks links, I think, and it doesn't seem to work. But if you have a score that you're working on and can't figure out something and you want help with, stick it in the MuseScore Cafe group here. So let me put that in MuseScore. There we go. So if you add it to the group here, then, and I'll pin this so that that'll remain visible. So if you add, you might have to join the group if you haven't already. And you'll be able to add scores to this, and then when you ask a question about it, then we can see what the score actually is, what we're dealing with. So yeah, I also will give you my my 10-second commercial for my website. The Mastering MuseScore School. This is where you can find my online course, the Mastering MuseScore Complete online course, as well as my theory courses, etc., etc. So if you're new to the cafe, that's about your only commercial announcement you're going to get is me telling you I've got these cool online courses. Check them out. All right. So what I want to do is talk about some of the things that I've dealt with in my own scores and show you some of the problems that I encountered and solutions that I have found. And and I will keep monitoring the chat to see what else comes up. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to use the fact that a lot of my scores I've actually uploaded to MuseScore.com. So if I go to my scores, I will see them in kind of reverse chronological order, and then I can talk about any issues that came up that I feel like, oh, I should show how I dealt with this issue. And yeah, there's always things to talk about. Um, I think I will start, really, a lot of these things didn't have any particular problems that needed solving, but this one just had a really small one that, for me was a pretty easy one to solve, but for people who don't know about it, it wouldn't be. So this actually, well, it won't work to load it in here. Sorry, I need to actually load it into into MuseScore. But I'll tell you what the problem was. The problem was somewhere around here. All these chord symbols are pretty long, and there's a lot of them, and they all started running up against each other, such that uh, one of them was like, okay, I think it was this A flat 7 didn't fit next to this A flat minor here. It ended up going above because they overlapped a little. And so I had to adjust the position of some chords to prevent that from happening. And as I'm looking at it, oh no, it's this one right here. I can see right now it's this guy right here. So if you look at the G flat here, notice that it's aligned with the B flat. This D flat is aligned, the D flat chord is aligned with the A flat here. But this chord here, the A flat minor chord, you can see I kind of centered it over this note, because if it had been left aligned, it would have extended into the next measure and that chord would have popped up. So I will show you how I might solve that, or how I did solve that, as just one example. Some people probably already have a pretty good idea about that, but because there were a couple different possibilities, I will show those. See if I have that still in my recent scores here. I load so many people's other scores when I'm helping debug problems that you never know what's actually going to be in my recent list. So what I'll tell you right now is that there was a combination of things that I tried. One was uh, just adjusting the stretch on the measures to see if that gave me a better result. And I think I gave up on that and said, nope, that wasn't going to be the way. The way was going to be and of course, I do not remember where I put this dang thing. And that's always an issue. Oh, did I just see it? I think I put it under the music masterclass. All right. So if I select these couple measures and press Control R to reset, you'll see this is how it originally looked. This D flat 7 was popped up there. So you have a choice of how you're going to try to do this, because this chord overlaps the bar line here, and we don't automatically handle that very well. The automatic collision detection is kind of a measure at a time, and it doesn't there's not easy ways of dealing with it. Let's put it that way. So let me just check and see if I see any comments coming in here. So how do you get the chords to play and playback? They should happen by default in a new score. If your score is actually created in MuseScore 3.6, 3.5 or later, they will play already. So like in this score right here, if I enter a C chord, plays. If I enter, if I load an older score, it won't play by default. If you want them always to play by default, go to, let's see, Edit, Preferences, Advanced, and then you'll see this thing here that says, I gotta find it, Score, Harmony, Play. That's the playback. And you'll see that there's two settings here. One to disable chord symbol playback for compatibility, meaning for older scores, and another setting that disables it for new scores. The default is what I have here. It is not disabled for new scores, meaning new scores, it does play. But older scores, you see, it by default, we disable the playback. Well, all you got to do is uncheck that option. And now, when you load an older score, it will play back the chord symbol. The other thing you can always do is select a chord symbol and come over here to the inspector and check or uncheck the play box, and then hit the set as style button, the S. I don't know if my head is covering that, but trust me, there's a play control here in the inspector, and there is an S for set as style right next to it. Okay, so in my score here, we had this. So I could have chosen to move this or just out of the way. But I was a little worried that that wouldn't be very clear. I move this chord, and first of all, you notice that I'm dragging it here. Yeah, some of you know I never drag normally. I don't drag. So let me reset that. I would use uh, the right arrow to nudge it a little bit at a time until it falls down, because the automatic placement will notice, now I have room to move it down. So I move it a little bit at a time. Some of you also know I don't usually use the arrow by itself. I use control arrow. Arrow by itself moves like a tenth of a staff space at a time, which is great if you really need to make really fine adjustments. But I don't know, I like round numbers. So I move control right arrow, which moves a full staff space at a time. And not enough yet. And now it finally is. So I use that sort of thing a lot, but that moves this chord kind of too late in the measure. So I chose not to do that. I decided it would be safer to move this chord to the left. So that is one thing you could do. But I think the other thing that I tried doing, let me just undo all my changes, get back to how I started. I think, okay, yes, I can see here, I did use an X offset here. So I must have hit control left twice. But the other thing I probably tried was, let me reset it again. I probably tried this first. What happens if I just center it over the chord? Um, I could have done that, and maybe that would have been a better answer so that it would have just been centered over the chord. The problem with manual adjustments is always they look fine when you're looking at the score the way it is, but then something changes about the score later. You change how many measures are on a system or something, it doesn't look as good. So this to me, making these manual adjustments like this is usually a bit of a last resort for me. I'm usually thinking, can I fix it by uh, changing a style setting so it happens automatically? That's one of the things I like to do. Or another one would be, yeah, if I can change it by centering this chord rather than making a manual adjustment. To be honest, I'm not sure why I didn't do that, because normally I would have. But some of the other things that I might have tried is, what happens if I just reset all my adjustments again. If I just make, so here's back to what it looked like. What happens if I just try to make this measure wider by enough that they don't overlap? Maybe make both the measures a little wider. So I'm going to press, let me get my screen, my keyboard display thing happening. Now when I click something, now when I press a key, hopefully, all right, that didn't work. Yeah, it doesn't always work for some reason. I really need to get a better system for my displaying keystrokes. There we go. Try it again. There we go. Okay. So if I press the curly brace, it'll stretch the measures out. And if I stretch them out enough, then now they don't overlap anymore, right? That looks ugly there. That's not enough. I keep overlapping them. And I'm doing them both just so they seem like they're in good proportion to each other. But realistically, it just made everything else on that measure, on that line, too tightly spaced. So I wasn't a fan of it. The other thing that I could have done, and again, I'm just going to reset things. Uh, The other thing I could have done is say, you know what, maybe I don't need to put all those measures on one line. Maybe if I put in a line break here, then it would s- have enough space. But unfortunately, my page is pretty full here. And if I try to do that, it doesn't fit on the page unless I make the page smaller. For people who don't know, I mean, to make the notation smaller. So if you don't know how to do that, format, page settings, and here is what controls the size of the staff. Literally, you're controlling the size of a space between staff lines. But if you make that a little smaller, then eventually that next line does fit. So those are some of the things that you might encounter when you're working on something. So it wasn't a big problem, but there's a number of different techniques that you get to encounter trying to figure out how to solve it. So I'm just undoing all my changes to make sure. I'll just close the file because I don't want to mess it up. Okay, so that's one sort of thing. And again, if people want to, oops, where did my, I guess I'll just go back to my scores, but I also want to go back to the cafe so that if people do start attaching some scores to the group, make sure you give me a heads up in the chat that you've done that, but then I will be able to uh, so Kirk, by the way, I just saw this morning that you had that question. I don't know if you're here today, but I did answer your question about installing on Chromebook. I saw someone else had already done it. So if you've got it taken care of, great. If not, check out my reply there because the process that I have for um, installing on Chromebook is it's not the one that's in the manual. I've made some modifications. I've made some customizations that I think make it go more smoothly. And I'm trying to get more people to kind of test that and see, make sure it really works. And then I'll update the official instructions. I've gotten at least one person to acknowledge that it works for them, but I guess I want a little more confirmation before I really say that it works for everyone. Okay, so these are all those Christmas songs. Some of you saw that I did demonstrations talking about. Here's the "We Gather Together" thing that we did. I'm going to bring this up because there was probably a thing or two in here that I needed to deal with somehow, and so let me just bring that up. So that would have been. Had I started the music masterclass yet, or was that part? Or was that when I was still doing it as part of the cafe? See that this is the thing is now I don't know. I'll tell you what I'm gonna do. So problem solve right here. I don't know how to find it in here, but I do know how to use the find facility on my computer. Right. So that's what I'm gonna do is I'll go to my scores folder and do a search for we gather, and now I know where my dang thing is. Actually, I don't know where it is. But I do the search and it will show them all to me. And then I can see, hey, look at all these different files here. Where's the actual MuseScore file? Here it is. And then it doesn't work on this system, unfortunately. The drag and drop thing doesn't work properly. On that's one of the few things that I haven't gotten working right on Chromebook. Just for people that might be using Chromebook. But what I can do is get info on that file, and then it'll tell me where it is. It's in Scores Mastering MuseScore. So it's in my Mastering MuseScore folder. Why not? So I'm constantly, because I've got so many different things going on, I have all these different folders, and then sometimes I confuse myself about where I've put different things. So that's like a problem everyone gets to figure out how to solve for themselves. Oh, seriously? It crashed opening that score. Uh, crashed opening that score. Why would that be? I have no idea. So if it crashes again, then I think I know what I'm doing after this cafe. is figuring out what the heck that crashed over. Um, this is a test version of MuseScore that we're loading in right now. Um, just so you know, this is a version that I built this morning that's testing some bug fixes and things. So it's possible some recent change that I made broke it. Yeah, this time it worked, so I don't know. All right, so if you are haven't tried MuseScore 3.6 yet, and now you're first loading an older score, and you'll see that this dialog shows up asking if you want to update some things. Um, because we have this new notation font, we have this new text font. Um, I'm going to not do that because I just want to see the score as it was before. So I'm going to say keep old style. And now when you see this, one of the things that you'll see is I have the page arranged landscape format. Why did I do that? Well, I did it because the number of staves that I have here, had I done it portrait format on the page, it would have left a lot of blank space on the bottom. And yes, MuseScore 3.6 would have happily increased the spacing of the staves to account for that, but still it would have meant fewer measures per page. But there wasn't enough space to get two systems per page. So for this many staves, it works for me to do landscape. There are any number of people who will tell you that's bad form. You should never do scores landscape. Eh, I don't care. For me, it actually works pretty well. When I direct ensembles, I'm more than happy to read off a landscape score if that enables things to fit more nicely. Doesn't bother me in the least. Now, if we were talking like an orchestra score, and so the page, because an orchestra score, the page is really tall, and if you put that on its side, well, now we're talking a problem. But if we're talking about just a normal size sheet of paper, not a problem. So, is it possible to rewire MuseScore? So, I'm not exactly sure what you mean by rewire, but if you just mean you want to have the playback go through a digital audio workstation, yes, you can do that. Assuming your workstation supports jack, that's the way they, or MIDI out actually. So, let me show you this. If you go to Edit, Preferences, IO. Here you'll see all these and the specifics will depend on your operating system and your device drivers. So every system will show different things here. But under MIDI output, if you have anything connected that shows as a MIDI output device, whether it's a hardware device like an actual MIDI out cable connecting to a synthesizer or connecting to an external sequencing kind of device or an external Pro Tools setup or whatever, any of those sorts of things will show up here under MIDI output. It's possible your digital audio workstation will install drivers that will make it show up in here also. Maybe it will, maybe it won't. But what it will probably do is allow you to use the Jack audio server. This is a separate program called Jack that you install, and its whole purpose is to interconnect different programs. So if your digital audio workstation supports Jack, then this is where you go to tell MuseScore to send its output through Jack. And it will do that. And then when you hit the play button, when you play a note within MuseScore, it'll happily send that playback to your digital audio workstation. So yeah, that works, and it should work on all operating systems, Windows, Linux, and Mac OS. It sometimes can be a little finicky to set up, but it does work. So when I look at this, I remember there were a number of things that I wanted to solve in doing this that I have solved, but any number of them could be worth pointing out. So one of them is the fact that on vocal scores, the dynamics go above the staff, so they're out of the way of the lyrics. But on instrumental staves, you want the dynamics below the staff. Here, it's actually between these two guitar staves, so I could have put it above the tablature. But you see once the bass and the drums come in, I definitely want it below. So the question is, how do you do that? And it's a problem that comes up over and over because we don't have an automatic way to like specify for this staff, I want dynamics to be above, but for this staff, I want it to be below. You can set it for all of them. In other words, if I go to um, Format, Style, Dynamics, I got to find Dynamics in my list. By the way, some people might wonder why this isn't alphabetic. The idea is to make it logical, because alphabetical isn't necessarily logical. Like things like right now, all the text is together, right? Staff text, tempo text, lyrics, dynamics, rehearsal mark, figure bass, chord symbols. These are all text related things, and they're all next to each other. But they wouldn't be if it was alphabetic. So sometimes alphabetical doesn't help you, or if you didn't know what to call the thing, that doesn't help you. Um, Anyhow, that's just an observation there. So dynamics, you can see that the placement is set to below. So by default, dynamics will be below the staff. And if I enter a new dynamic onto this staff, it will be below, as you can see, which is not what we want. So what I actually did was I entered all my dynamics, and I think, okay, what I probably did is I just pressed X to flip them up as I went because it was easy. There weren't that many dynamics. But if you don't feel like doing that, or you just want to make sure you've got them all, what you can do is right click one and say select all similar elements in same staff. Now all of the dynamics on this staff are selected, and I can come over to the inspector, and again, my face is probably covering it up. I apologize for that. Uh, but let's see. I'm just going to do this for the moment. Above is, you see the placement here. So this is where I could set the placement to above if it wasn't already that way. So I'm just forcing, I'm not setting the style to be above because that would affect all the staves. But since I only have the dynamics on this staff selected, I can use the placement here to get them all above, or I can move them all below again or back above, right? So that's something. And only get my, because now it's covering up the score, I'm sure. Okay. Um, so that is a common problem that comes up when you're dealing with uh, vocal scores, that you'll want the dynamics above. Now, if it's purely vocal, no accompanying instruments, then you'll use that style setting, and now all the staves will get that. But if it's mixed, if there's vocal and instrumental staves, then you set the style setting the way most of the staves are. If it's mostly instrumental with just a couple vocal staves, then keep the style below, and then you can flip the vocal ones above. But if it's mostly vocal with just maybe one instrumental staff, maybe then you would do it the other way around. You set your style above and then manually set the instrumental ones below. Okay. Um, definitely feel free to be giving me suggestions of your own problems. If you think about some problem you have in a score, something you haven't been able to figure out, something you've kind of had to live with because you haven't known the way to deal with it, just add the score, get the score uploaded to MuseScore.com, add it to the cafe group, and then shoot me a message in the chat. But meanwhile, I'll just keep seeing what I can see here, and think about whether there's any other like specific problems I wanted to solve. Okay, so here's one that comes up over and over again. You know that you want to slow down at the end of the score. So let's hear the end of this. All right, so many of you, participated in that or heard the music. Maybe because I only gave you one measure before it started the rallentando, it wasn't as obvious that it was slowing down, but it was. And you can see what's happening here. I will zoom in more so you can see that much better. There's a whole bunch of invisible tempo markings. That is what's making it slow down. Let me start it a little sooner. Earlier. So it's just gradually slowing down because of all those tempo markings. I don't have the patience to enter those tempo markings myself. So when I add a rallentando, what I used to just do is just say, just change the tempo to this, and it won't be a gradual change, it'll be a sudden change, and I'll live with it. But there is just this fantastic uh, tempo changes plugin here under the plugins menu. It's not there by default. You have to download the thing. So you have to go to MuseScore, and while I'm there, then I'll just show maybe a few other plugins because there's a bunch of plugins that I find to be just indispensable. So if I go to download plugins, you'll see all of these plugins here that you can download. And then once you download one, let's say if there's a new one that I haven't yeah, it's just hard to even know what's worth installing here. Um, but new retrograde. Hey, let's install the new retrograde. You know, it's only new until it's not new. I don't know how old it is. But if I download this plugin, I'm going to put it in my plugins folder. So MuseScore 3 plugins. And notice it's a zip file. So I'm going to have to unzip the thing. Um, but I will remember to do that. So it's downloaded, and then I can go in here and go to my plugins folder. Come on. Now it's not even MuseScore that's doing weird things. Oh, that is the right folder. No, it's not. It's scores. Oh, I have to clear the search box. I didn't know that. Huh. Been using this Chromebook for over a year now, and I never realized I had to clear the search before I could use the things over here. Anyhow, MuseScore 3 plugins. So this is the thing, the zip file that I just, no, that's not the zip file I just done. I only sort by date. New retrograde master. Okay. So what I would want to do is just unpack this thing. And you would like to think that there's just a way in to just unpack the whole thing. But if there is a way to do that on Chromebook, I don't actually know where it is. This creates a new zip file. How about no more actions? No. So that's really it's really weird to me that unzipping a file isn't simpler than it is on a Chromebook. Um, but if I double click this thing, it should open, and it's not opening. So maybe I'm just going to, oh, there it is. So I can now take this folder and just paste it. I copied it, and now I'm going to paste it into my plugins folder. That's unfortunately how it seems like this works on a Chromebook. But that is how you unzip things. So I've now unzipped it, and now I can go back to MuseScore, and I can say plugins. Apply score breaks apart. That's not the one. Okay, I go to plugin manager. Now I can find that one. Does anyone remember what it was called? New retrograde, right? Here it is. And I can check it. And now it will show up in the plugins menu. So what this should do is if I select this region, I would like to think when I run that retrograde plugin, it will reverse it for me. Ta-da! It worked. Yay. So plugins exist to do a lot of really, really useful things that you might wish were built into MuseScore, but for whatever reason are not. So that was retrograde, and you saw it took me all of a minute to, and that was despite fumbling around with zip. Most of it was just fumbling around with zip to get that working. But there's all sorts of ones here. There's ones that will automatically add saxophone fingerings and tin whistle tablature. I mean, there's just crazy the number of different plugins that people have created to do things. So I've already downloaded and installed a bunch, and they're great problem solvers. So the one that I was going to mention there was the tempo changes one. So let's listen to this little playback here. That's what it sounds like. But if I select this passage and I run plugins tempo changes, it'll now ask me, do I want it to say something? Yeah, I'll say RAL. And then I tell it what start tempo I want, 120, what end tempo I want, 60, and hit. And then it's got some controls that let you fine tune how gradual the thing is. Um, uh, I'm sure that if you really want to get really detailed about exactly how fast it slows down, there's fun things to play with in here. But I'm gonna also assume the defaults are good. So I hit apply, and notice it added in all these invisible tempo markings. And when I play it now, there you go. I got my rallentando. So that plugin does just really, really nice things. So can you put two or more songs in one file? Yes, absolutely. So a little backstory here before I show you the current way. Once upon a time, we had a feature called albums where you could create separate scores and then you would create what was called an album and it would stick and it would glue them together basically. The feature didn't work very well and it was very limited. It was limited in that the scores had to have the exact same instrument. So you couldn't have like a string quartet and then a choral piece and then a piano solo piano piece. They had to all be string quartet, and even if it was all like orchestra movements, they'd better have the exact same instrumentation. So it was limited in that way, and had other limitations, bugs, etc. And so we ended up having to just remove the feature a couple years ago because it just was too limited. So meanwhile, it's now been rewritten. So MuseScore 4 will hopefully have a vastly improved version of it. But as I said, it's not there now. But if you just want to have more than one song, what you're going to use is a section break. So this might be your first song. Let's just call it. Sorry, my uh, light is on a timer. So I have to do that every once in a while. Okay, so I go. Oh, by the way, for people who haven't seen before, I have my special palette, my special arrangement of the palettes that I've created. You can just drag the palettes all over the place, right? I can drag lines above bar lines or back again. Um, I want it back where I had it. So, and you can also, like I said, add palettes, and I created a new palette, called it layout. And then I took all these symbols that are in different places. Why are these yellow? Oh, I know why these are yellow, because I changed a setting recently, and I'll have to fiddle with that. I was experimenting. I had a visually disabled, impaired user was wondering if they could make their music yellow, and I was experimenting with settings to do that. And apparently, it got stuck in my palette, so I'll have to fix that later. Um, but I just dragged these symbols in, like from the breaks and spacers. I dragged in these symbols so that I would have my own layout palette that has the things that I use a lot. It's got the bar lines. Oh, that's just crazy that they're yellow now. And so forth. So what we're going to want though is the section break. The section break I get from my layout palette because I use that thing a lot. But if you come over to the breaks and spacers palette and you just click this, you now have uh, a new song. Let me do that somewhere other than right there. Let me do it after the third line so it's a little more clear what's going on. So some of the things that are happening here is, notice that by default in MuseScore 3.6, the first system is indented because that's traditional in, I don't know, 70% of the music out there. It's not so traditional in some kinds of music. So if you need to disable that, you go to Format, Style, Score, and disable the indentation there. But for our purposes, we're going to assume we want it. And in a songbook, it would be typical to indent it because that's one of the ways you would know visually looking at it that you've started a new song is by that indent, just like a new paragraph. So one of the things that the section break does is gives you that indent. The other thing it does is resets the measure numbering. So notice the beginning of the piece started with no measure number. And then after 4 measures, we see measure 5. And then after 4 more measures, we see measure 9. After the section break, it resets. So again, there's no measure number, and then 4 measures later is measure 5. So they really are distinct songs. Also, it didn't put in a new time signature for me, but if I add one now, if I say, oh, this song is in 3/4, then, oh gosh, that's going to be annoying until I figure that out. 3/4. Um, so it added more space to kind of fill the page here. That's part of the new system of what happens in 3.6 is automatically trying to fill out the page. So I mentioned that with respect to We Gather Together, it would have stretched out those staves to fill up the page. So here it did it for me here. So I've added that 3/4 and it's yellow. Boy, I'm gonna have to fix this. I'm gonna have to fix my palette because that's just interesting to me. Um, it's distracting to me, but I am not sure. So I'll show you how I did that, by the way. I went to Edit, Preferences, Advanced, and then here is the setting to control the color of your score. And I set it to black. I mean, I set it to yellow when I was testing this, and I'll set it to pink. And now what I should find is if I create a new score, it's going to be pink. There it is, and there's all my pink stuff in the palette, right? And then I decide, hey, I don't want that. I want it back. What I did was I know what I did. I created a separate workspace. And I left the yellow there, and somehow that workspace has bled into here. So that's what I'm going to have to fix. But in any case, let's see if this fixes it. I'm going to go back to Edit, Preferences. So you're watching me debug a problem right now. Um, and I go back and change it back to black. And unfortunately, it didn't immediately fix my palettes, which is really quite annoying. So I'm just gonna have to live with that, I guess, until I, don't have to waste your time with it. But I'm gonna go ahead and so here's my reversed workspace where I deliberately set that up. In my reversed workspace, I have pink music on a purple background just to test to see if it worked. And then what I expected was I would go back to my regular editing workspace and find things normal, but it just isn't the case. I'm going to have to keep fiddling with what order I do things in to fix that. So anyhow, that is where I'm at right now. Okay, so I've got my score here, and you just have to excuse the yellow stuff here. But the other thing, so you notice when I added that key signature, the time signature, it didn't add a courtesy one at the previous line. That's another feature of the section break. The other feature of the section break that's worth knowing is when you play it back, it'll pause and then start the next song. So, section break has these settings that you can control whether or not it starts over again with instrument names, whether it starts the new section with measure one, whether it indents that first system, and how long you want that pause to be. So, all of those things are things that you can kind of set. So, yeah, you set that up, and then you just enter your song. Now, if you already have the songs individually, you can create a new score and then copy and paste each song individually into this, and hope that there's not like a lot of tempo, a lot of time signature changes and so forth within the song, because as you may know, those don't copy and paste. It's one of the things that, yes, we would love at some point to implement a version of copy and paste that does copy time signatures and things. It's just not something we have yet. Um, okay, so boy, that yellow is really distressing. Now, I wonder, are all my palettes that way now? Yeah, they all are. So somehow there's got to be something that I could do involving like changing the color, closing, restarting that would eventually fix it. Um, I don't want to have to reset this workstation. How about if I go to my cafe palette, my cafe workspace, which I haven't been in forever. I bet this one is hopefully black. Good. All right, so at least I have a usable one. I only have to fix my my custom one. I can handle that. All right, so there we go. Now I have a nice usable one. So my cafe workspace here is one that I created so that I could demo things like how to arrange things. Like if I wanted there to be a layout palette here, create custom palette, call it layout. And now I've got a layout palette, and then I can do all those same things that I did before as far as dragging things in. I had dragged in my spacers, my breaks, my spacers. And I just missed. Anyhow, that's how you create custom palettes. And there we go. So right now that's just a copy of the same palette, but what you also saw was that I had done this. Now, so what I could do is just temporarily move this palette up here. Hey, let's just move that palette up there. Now it's gonna be a lot easier for me to drag it, right? Eh, and and you know what? I don't even need this palette anymore because I've just, this is insert a measure. I don't need that. I never use that. I just use the keyboard command for it. So I'll just delete the frames and measure. Oops, I want to delete, well, whatever. I want to delete, uh, well, first let me show you. I'll reset that palette because I screwed up. I didn't mean to delete the text frame from it. I meant to delete the palette. So I will click these three dots here and say, no, I won't. I'll just press delete is what I'll do. And bye-bye frames and measures palette. I don't need it anymore because all of its contents are copied here. Similarly, I don't need the breaks and spacers palette anymore. So I can just click it and delete. And click it, delete. Sorry. So that's something I can do. So you would expect a double bar line at the end. And yeah, that's something the section break doesn't add automatically, but then you add one yourself from the bar lines palette. Boom. And actually, you may remember that my original layout palette had some of these double bar lines because I do use them. And it also had this dotted one, I think, because I used that a bunch, and it used this tick one a bunch. So I had all these different, and I think I even had the repeat ones. And whether or not I did before, I'm going to now, because why not? So it doesn't take very long to set up one of these custom palettes. So the other thing you probably want then is a title here. Well, now that I've set up my layout palette, here's my text frame. Boom. And now I can just enter, actually, instead of a text frame, because I really want it to be a title, let me undo that. I'll add a vertical frame. And then I can right click this thing and say, add title. And it will show up actually looking like a title. And I can even say add composer and put my name in there. So it really does look for all practical purposes like another song. So yeah, you have to create some of these things manually like that. But yeah, it's totally possible then to use this to assemble a songbook of multiple songs. As I said, in MuseScore 1 and 2, there was this album feature that could automatically take songs that were originally separate and combine them. It just didn't work very well for MuseScore 4. We're hoping to have a version, and it's actually pretty much implemented. It just needs some tweaking and some graphic user interface work to make it really as easy to use as we want it to be. But functionally, it's working great. And it will automatically combine songs. But this is how you do it currently. You just use the section break to set up most of this stuff, and then you add your own double bar line, you add your own title frame, and that's how you get the job done. All right. So, yeah, I was wondering the same thing for Michael, right? That was Michael Gold. When we were listening to the piece in the music masterclass last time. Um, that was a saxophone quartet piece. It just had some really cool sounding sound fonts, and I was wondering what they were also, and would love to know if they're ones that are available. But let's go there just so that you all can hear, because not everyone who's watching this was there for that music masterclass last time, but some of you were. So I'm just going to play a little bit of it so you can hear, and then I'll show you how to load a sound font if you've never done that before. Um, so where am I doing? Sheet music. It was here. So I'll just hit play. Anyhow, that's the idea. So that sound font sounds, I think a lot more realistic than the default sound font, which is, yeah, saxophones are, I always find one of the worst instruments in any sound font. And I'll tell you why. Let me load the default one and then you can compare. So that was under the Music Masterclass. So here's what it sounds like. So I mean, it's they're both recordings of of saxophones. There's no, so they're both realistic, I guess, in that way. But there's subtleties in how there's a lot of subtle. First of all, like how good was the saxophonist that you sampled? These sound really nice. It's really beautiful tone on these sound fonts. It's just a really beautiful tone. But there's another thing that happens. Wind instruments have a distinction between tonguing and slurring, right? Where's my melodica? The difference between versus where every note is tongue. Ta 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 ta. Um, so unfortunately, sound font technology doesn't have an easy way of distinguishing the two. So you end up, if you make a perfect sample of someone going ta, then it doesn't sound right when you put two of them next to each other because you're going to hear ta ta and not what you really would expect a saxophonist to do, which is ta, slur them. And so there's no easy way to get this slur thing happening using the sound font technology as we've implemented it anyhow. So what you try to do if you're developing a sound font for wind instruments is you make them as legato as you can, so that when you play it, it sounds legato. It's convincing whether you like. I couldn't tell. I mean, if this was tongued or slurred, it just sounded nice. Like it really sounded slurred to me. So I'm thinking that the samples probably, yeah, I just don't even know how those samples were created, but it sounds just beautifully legato. So so these are, but are these sound fonts that came? Oh, great! I'm looking forward to then looking at it. I didn't see the post yet. So great. So um, yeah, if these are ones that we can all get to, then that would be just absolutely fantastic. Um, but so, in fact, if there's a link there, I'm just going to do it so you can see it. Why not, right? So you said you posted it to the group. So I guess it was in a comment in here. Ah, beautiful. They come from Free Sound Vault. Beautiful. Okay, so all right. So it sounds like it might be. Oh, here we go. Here's alto sax one. So I'm going to download this thing, and then you see. So here's alto sax one. I'm going to download it, and then you'll watch what the process looks like. So this was the plugins folder. I want to download it to the sound fonts folder. Scores are where your scores normally go. Sound fonts is where I'm going to put this thing. So I will put it here. And then while I'm there, let me just grab a few of the others. I'm going to grab the baritone sax because I bet tenor sax. Let's just not worry about it. I just got those two. Now that I have those couple here, what I'll do is I will go to the, let's listen to some alto notes. Let's enter some alto notes here. So to me, this octave is reasonable. That octave is pretty whiny. I would not be happy with an alto saxophonist who played their E. Now, of course, this isn't really an E, right? This is transposed. That's really the C sharp above the staff, which is not the best note on a saxophone. But still, I would not be happy with a saxophonist who sounded like that playing that note. Um, all right, so now what I want to do is I'm going to show you how to install that sound file. I've downloaded it. I'll now go to View, Synthesizer, and you'll see the default sound font here, MuseScore General. That's the one that is there by default. But I'll go to Add, and now you'll see that alto sax sound font here. And why not? I'll select the baritone sax one also. There's some other ones that I've downloaded also in the past. And I'll say load. So they are now loaded. And notice the order that they're in. Whatever one is on top is going to be the default. If I close this window right now, in fact, let's just listen to this. Everything's going to be baritone sax, right? Everything, including the drums, are now baritone sax. So that's not really what I want. I want to put MuseScore General as my default sound font, so I'll move it up to the top of the list. I accidentally clicked that like 3 times, I think, and so it's going to because I thought I was just hitting the up arrow. We used to only have an up arrow and a down arrow, so you could only move sound fonts like one at a time. Now we've added the go all the way to the top function, which is great, but I forgot that and I clicked the up arrow 3 times. So rearranging the sound fonts takes a moment. It has to reload the thing. So and then it has to shuffle everything around. So rearranging sound fonts is not as fast of a process as you might like. All right, so now I've got that alto sax sound font. It's not used yet. This is still the default one, but now I can go to the mixer. I'll press F10 to bring up the mixer, and I can select the alto staff and then tell it. So because those new sounds were added at the end, I scroll to the bottom of the list and I see all of this business. Oh, and look at that. There's all these different variations that have different attacks and so forth. And so probably there was maybe Michael used some manipulation there and added some stuff to get it to switch between them. I don't know what the X switch does, if it has some way of switching based on articulation symbols or what. But I'm going to just go with alto sax medium here. Okay, I'm not crazy about that sound either, actually. But that one sounds good. So it is, that C sharp is just a bad note. It was a bad note to have picked. So so that's the medium. Let's hear the soft, because that sounded like a softer sound that you were using. Ha yeah. Nah, see, already I like it. I like the alto sax soft sound. Yeah, so that's a considering the C sharp is not one of the saxophone's best notes. That's an altissimo note, which is barely even playable. Yeah, nice sounding thing there. So what I did again is I went to the mixer by pressing F10, or it's in the view menu. I selected the alto and then under sound here. By the way, in MuseScore 3.6, you will see that this part of the panel doesn't necessarily show up by default. That's not a bug, it's actually a fix to something that happened a while ago. Um, this button here controls whether that all displays, but this is what you'll see by default. And the reason you'll see it is there was a preference under Edit Preferences. There was a setting here, uh, here under Edit Preferences Score, Show MIDI Controls and Mixer. That was a preference that you could set to control whether or not those controls would show up in the mixer. And that setting was always ignored before, and then it got reset when you restarted the program. And so you've all had this setting turned off. If you go and look at that setting right now, you probably see it turned off, even though if you're using an older version, the mixer displays because it just wasn't working. Well, now that setting works, but because everyone has it turned off, you're not seeing it. So anyhow, what you have to do is do what I've done, which is turn that setting on. So now when you open the mixer, you do see that top stuff. So anyhow, I selected the track that I wanted, and then uh, I basically scrolled down to the bottom because that's where all these sounds are, all the nice sounds here. I want to see what the X switch does. I'm assuming it's probably going to do something that doesn't make sense. Well, it sounds okay by default. I thought maybe it was gonna sound like nothing, and it would do nothing until you added appropriate, stuff, because often, switched sounds require you to play games with them to get them to sound. Um, Soprano sax, alto sax, soft, yeah, that's exactly what I got there. So, alright, so cool. So, yeah, there's all sorts of sound fonts that are available. He found that one on a website somewhere and pointed me to it, and that's great. Um there's all sorts of sound fonts you can find online, including if you go to musescore.org. If you just go to the MuseScore website, like not musescore.com, but the actual musescore.org, where you download the software from, if you go to under the handbook and then search for sound fonts, you'll find all that information on how to do that installation, but you'll also find a list of some nice sound fonts that you can try. Some of these sound fonts are more like the MuseScore General one, where they contain all instruments. Like the General User GS is a pretty popular one. Um, it's um, it's smaller than the default one, but some people like some of its sounds better. Uh, Usually, bigger sound font means better sound, though, because it means the samples were recorded longer and in more detail and more of them. But if you do a really good job, you can make a small sound font sound good. And Christian Collins, who actually worked on MuseScore General, created this one to be a good small sound font. So, anyhow, these sound fonts you can just install. If it says it's a GM sound font, you can install it and put it at the top of the list, and it'll just replace all the sounds with, it'll replace your piano with a new piano, your saxophone with a new saxophone, your violin with a new violin, etc. But that saxophone sound font that we installed obviously only had saxophone sound, so it's not good as a general one. That's why you have to put it down at the bottom of the list to use it. So anyhow, I've just showed a bunch of things. I didn't have any particular agenda. I just wanted to show some things and answer some questions. And so I feel like we've done that. So remember, last week I mentioned that I was hoping that we would get Tentacruel on this week. There's still enough going on that just didn't work out. But I have gotten we have booked him for 2 weeks from today. So 2 weeks from today, February 9th, Martin will be with us, and we'll probably start by talking about MuseScore 3.6, which is just released a couple weeks ago. We're about to put out 3.6.1, to fix some bugs, and so he'll want to talk about the new font he created and some new stuff like that. So I'm sure he'll want to talk about MuseScore 3.6, but right now he's really focused looking forward at what MuseScore 4 is going to look like. And so we'll want to talk about that, but probably there won't be enough time to talk about both things. So my guess is on February 9th, 2 weeks from now, we'll mostly talk about 3.6, maybe hint at some at MuseScore 4 stuff, and then we'll just bring them back on in a little bit to talk more about MuseScore 4. So, again, hope you all enjoyed the session today. Just kind of a little scattered, dealing with whatever happened to come up. And next week, My plan then next week is to really look at a retrospective of MuseScore because I mentioned we're hitting the 10th anniversary of the release of MuseScore. MuseScore 1 came out 10 years ago. It was February, well, depending on when the update happened, when the announcement went out, basically February 4th ish. 4th, 5th, 6th, I think was the window there. I'm now doubting myself and not remembering the exact date. But anyhow, next week is our closest to that. The second will be the closest to that date. So we're going to use that as an opportunity to take a look back at all the different releases and how the features have been added over the years. So that's what we'll be looking at next week. Come join me tomorrow for the music masterclass. We'll talk about music and we'll look at some scores that have been submitted and just have fun making music and talking about it. So hope to see you for the music masterclass tomorrow. Go back to my site there, mastermuscore.com. If you don't know what I'm talking about, there's Music Masterclass right there. But then you'll end up coming back to YouTube when we're done. So hope everyone has a great day, great week, and see you next time. Okay, goodbye.